Carlo Acutis was born on May 3, 1991, the only child of Antonia and Andrea Acutis of Milan, Italy. Even as a baby, he was quite intelligent. He spoke his first words at 3 months and could say short sentences at 5. As he grew into a toddler, he was very open and talkative, saying hello to everyone he passed on the street. By the age of 4, he showed a great deal of interest in Christ and the Virgin Mary. When his mother, Antonia, would take him out for a walk, he liked to go inside the church and visit Jesus and kiss the cross. He picked flowers to place at the feet of the Virgin Mary. This devotion was surprising to his parents because they were not practicing Catholics at the time. Touched by Carlo's love for God, his mother, Antonia, decided to return to the church and eventually become a catechist. At 6 years old, Carlo accompanied his mother to class. He was a happy and generous child and interested in everyone. Many people commented to her that Carlo was really special and God must have plans for him. The priest in charge of catechism met Carlo and decided that he was ready to make his first communion at the age of 7. From that moment on, Carlo went to Mass and prayed the Rosary every single day. Carlo attended a competitive Jesuit school. In spite of his intelligence, he was never the center of jealousy because he was so positive and funny and tried to help everyone. He was fascinated by technology, and by the time he was 9, he became interested in computer programming. His mother recalls buying him college-level textbooks, and he began to teach himself to program. He eventually expanded his skills to video making and animation. He lived the life of a normal 21st century boy. He liked to laugh and joke with his friends, even make them little videos. He even liked to play with his PlayStation, although he imposed limits on himself. Sometimes he talked too much in class, and sometimes he overindulged in food. However, he was aware of his weaknesses and really made an effort to work on them. He went to confession regularly and used to keep a journal that reflected on his behaviors and how he could improve himself. He once said, "What does it matter if you can win 1,000 battles if you cannot win against your own corrupt passions? The real battle is within ourselves." Carlo was always aware of other people's sufferings. In his own circle, he consoled his friends in their struggles, always encouraging them to do the right thing, but he was never overbearing about it. He had the gift of knowing the right thing to say and when and how to say it. He would say that he always tried to live in the presence of God. Jesus was his first priority, and because of this, he had a very pure and loving heart. People sensed this and were attracted to him. In addition to his prayer life, he and his mother also volunteered to bring food and blankets to the homeless of Milan. He would round up his friends to help with this and other projects at his parish. Carlo made his confirmation at 11 years old, and then began helping out with catechism in his parish. He noticed that many of the children had a hard time with concepts because their parents never took them to Mass. Carlo once said, "The Eucharist is my highway to heaven." He believed that if people understood the true presence of Christ in the Eucharist and the amazing graces that we receive from it, their lives would be transformed. He then began his great project, to create a website presenting all the Eucharistic miracles of the world. He traveled to many of these sites and photographed them to create a virtual museum of miracles. He also created a downloadable exhibition for his site. He once said, "The more Eucharist we receive, the more we become like Jesus, so that on this earth we will have a foretaste of heaven." He believed that the sacraments were a fount of mercy that enabled us to carry our sufferings. Carlo was always conscious about not wasting time. People would ask him what he wanted to be when he grew up. He would deflect this question by saying, "Who knows?" or "To be close to Jesus, that's my life plan." It's almost as if he had a premonition that he would not live a long life. He said, "All people are born as originals, but many die as photocopies." This sums up Carlo's aim to live life fully for others instead of focusing on himself. When Carlo was 15, many of his classmates came down with the flu. He was feeling ill, but thought he had the same. However, when Carlo's health didn't improve, his parents took him to the doctor. He was diagnosed with leukemia. Within a very short time, he was in a lot of pain, but he always thought of others. The doctors and nurses caring for him, and his parents, whom he tried to prepare for his death. He said to his mother, "Mama, I would like to leave this hospital, but I know I will not do so alive. I will give you signs, though, that I am with God. I die happy because I did not spend my life wasting my time on things not pleasing to God." He continued to smile and tried not to complain. He offered up his sufferings for the Church and the Holy Father. 1 week from his diagnosis, on October 12, 2006, Carlo died. The funeral was packed with friends and strangers, some even standing outside the church, but were all touched by the life of Carlo. His sanctity in life was already renowned, and people began to pray for his intercession. His mother received many accounts of people who were changed due to Carlo's witness of the faith. Carlo once said, "Our aim has to be the infinite and not the finite. The infinite is our homeland. We have always been expected in heaven." On the 4-year anniversary of his death, his mother gave birth to twins at the age of 44, the foretold sign that he had reached our heavenly home. Carlo Acutis was beatified in 2020.
When it comes to UFO videos and photos, I'd say about 80% of what gets reported tends to be the grainiest, most...
Catholics believe that at the Last Supper, when Jesus said, "This is my body," the bread actually became his body. Over the centuries, Christ has given us a series of Eucharistic miracles, where the bread is transformed into his flesh. The tissues from these Eucharistic miracles have been studied by medical doctors from around the world, and in this video you will hear from them firsthand and see their medical reports. What we see is that each miracle contains a startling pattern that science has discovered. The patterns are: 1. There is heart tissue. 2. The heart is living. 3. The heart is suffering. 4. The blood is type AB. And 5. DNA tests were all inconclusive. In this video, I'll focus on the 3 best documented Eucharistic miracles: Tixla, Buenos Aires, and Lanciano. We will start with Tixla, Mexico. On October 21, 2006, Father Raimundo Esteban and sisters were distributing communion during Mass. One sister brought over a ciborium to show Father that a red liquid had begun to come from the host. I spoke with Dr. Eduardo Sanchez Lazo, who personally analyzed the miraculous tissue. Using electron microscopy, he discovered the most amazing aspect I've ever heard for a Eucharistic miracle: that the blood came from inside the host. And the blood then covered the host in a similar way as when you get a paper cut. The blood flows from that point. He officially stated this: the possibility of bleeding coming from the outside to the inside is ruled out. Dr. Lazo's analyses are routinely presented in court, as he specializes in legal medicine. This eliminates the possibility of fraud due to the lack of technology. Here he says,
si no es una tecnología que nos va a llegar en 50 o 100 años, que todavía no la tenemos aquí.
Which means it is technology that should be here in 50 to 100 years, but we still do not have it here. He also mentioned that he put an unconsecrated host through the same tests, and it disintegrated. Is that amazing or what? Now, skeptics often raise this concern. How can one prove that the tissue analyzed was truly the tissue from the Eucharistic miracle? Here we see the doctor who had the host in his laboratory, found that the tissue was living 3 years after the event, formally claimed the statement above after studying it for 3 months, and DNA testing was inconclusive. This appears supernatural to me. Now let's look at the miracle in Buenos Aires, Argentina. On August 18, 1996, Father Alejandro Pazet was informed that there was a host sitting in a candlestick on the side of the church. It was dusty, so rather than consuming the host, it was put in a bowl of water to dissolve. 2 weeks later, this appeared. A renowned forensic pathologist, Dr. Frederick Zugby, who was on the History Channel, National Geographic, and taught at Columbia University, analyzed this tissue. Here is what he said. Heart tissue.
You get it from a person getting beat up across the chest.
One hypothesis was that this tissue was from a heart that was beaten across the chest. That is important as Jesus was severely beaten during his passion. Dr. Zegaby performed over 10,000 autopsies in his career, so proposing the cause of death is something he has experience with. While this hypothesis is not definitive, it shows that the heart was suffering. What we see in every Eucharistic miracle that's been medically analyzed is that it is heart tissue. I think it is Jesus showing the world that we all have broken or hardened hearts, and by receiving him, the Eucharistic heart of Jesus, he can heal us. Dr. Zugaby wrote his conclusions here and stated that he was not informed of the history of the material. The blood type was not tested due to the small amount of tissues, but DNA testing was performed by Forensic Analytical and the results were inconclusive. Going back to Tixla, the blood that was found was type AB. AB blood was also found on the Shroud of Turin. It is interesting how the Eucharistic miracles have type AB blood, and this was found before the Shroud was analyzed. Now, AB blood is the rarest form, with less than 7% of people in the world having this blood type. While this is not a proof of authenticity, it leads me, and I hope you, to believe that this is truly the flesh of Jesus Christ that we have the opportunity to receive at the holy sacrifice of the Mass. I mentioned earlier that in Tixla, they found that it was living tissue. In fact, in one of the slides, a white blood cell was in the process of swallowing fatty material. That's how alive this tissue was. In both Buenos Aires and Tixla, it had been years since the miracle, but there were still living white blood cells under the microscope. White blood cells typically die within minutes, but these were living, showing that the heart tissue was alive. Jesus said, "I am the living bread that came down from heaven, and the bread that I will give is my flesh for the life of the world." Should we be surprised that his flesh is living? Why else would he say, "I am the living bread"? Finally, we review Lanciano, or Lanciano, which is the most popular Eucharistic miracle. In the 8th century, a priest doubted whether our Lord was truly present in the consecrated host. When he said the words of consecration, "This is my body," during Mass, he saw the host turn into flesh. While this is amazing, what is even more amazing is that the flesh is on display. Over a millennia after the event, the flesh is still present. Last year, I was able to visit with my wife, twin boys, and in-laws. It was a priceless memory. In the 1970s, this was analyzed by Dr. Lanoli, and his article can actually be found on PubMed. The article is in Italian, but my great friends in Rome translated it into English. You can see it at this link. The full article has never before been shown on YouTube in English. His analysis revealed that this was human blood, type AB, and the flesh was heart tissue. He also stated that the blood has ratios of normal fresh blood. How could blood that is over 1,000 years old appear to be fresh? It's a miracle. Now, what if this were a forgery? How would you replicate this? Anatomic pathologist Dr. Jason DeGregorio would know how.
One would have to take tissue from a patient who has type AB blood. It would have to come from human heart tissue in a patient who has some sort of inflammatory pathologic process going on in the heart. Preserve that tissue in formalin or formaldehyde so that it would not deteriorate. And then one would have to take that tissue and place it on top of a host. That would be, frankly, as miraculous as the miracle that we're examining here.
Wow, that is amazing. In addition, this would require intense precision and a collaborative international effort, as these findings were not made public until the last decade. With current technology, the knowledge of these 5 doctors, and those that assisted them, science still cannot explain these miracles.
will adore you, and I will adore you, and I will adore you, God. And I will adore you.
And he's always here, waiting to see you face to face.
And I will adore you, God.
Consider this an invitation to just visit Jesus in the Eucharist. I mean, think about this. He makes himself so vulnerable that he gets placed in our hands or gets placed on our tongue. He abides in the tabernacle, just waiting for us to come by, just waiting for us to enter into his presence, enter into not only music, that's awesome, the video, incredible, but also to enter into silence. Now, here's my invitation is to do that, but also to not be afraid of the silence, to not be afraid of, is anyone going to be there? I have to tell you this, I've said it many, many times, that when I was in high school, about 15, 16 years old, I encountered Jesus truly present in the Eucharist. It was one of those things where I read about it and I was like, oh my gosh, this changes everything. It blows my mind. I said, okay, I'm going to go to adoration 1 hour every week as a 16-year-old. And I had read these stories of saints. These saints, the stories would be these saints would go into the Lord's presence in the tabernacle in the Eucharist, and hours would feel like minutes. And so I settled in, and I'll tell you this, minutes felt like hours. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to just say, okay, how do I do this right? The answer, of course, is there's no wrong way to adore the Lord. There's no wrong way to even abide or rest in his presence. Because here's Jesus, he just waits for you. He waits for you in the Eucharist. He waits for me in the Eucharist. And I got to tell you this, there's many, many times when I've not wanted to pray. There's many times when I'm like, I'm so busy, I got to do other things. I'll just drive past the church. There's never been a time when I've stopped and I thought, well, I just wasted 10 minutes. I just wasted half an hour. There's never been a time when I've wasted time with Jesus and I thought it was wasted time. You know what I mean? So here's the invitation. Don't be afraid of just being with Jesus, no matter how short or how long of a time it is. He just wants to spend time with you. Jesus is so humble. He is so vulnerable. And he waits for you. So why keep him waiting? Anyways, from all of us here to Ascension Presents, my name is Father Mike. God bless. But I know that I know that person in the monstrance. His name is Jesus Christ, and he is the Lord of everything.